If you work at a tech company or you think that your users are expecting you to do something very kind of amazing and wow factor with their email campaigns, maybe taking a responsive approach is the way to go. And so what you're doing in that instance is you're using what's called a media query that's part of the CSS3 specification to detect the size of the screen that the user is using the email on. And you can actually hide, view, display different types of content, even modify font sizes, all that kinds of things, based upon the size of the screen that the email is being viewed at. It's kind of like, auto-detecting for the email environment. Like I said, it's not for the faint of heart. In fact, we just tried doing this at Litmus with one of our campaigns, and our designer has spent, the better part of a week just trying to write the queries to make sure that it works the right way. So it's definitely investment. An example of this, though, is Campaign Monitor. They are a great resource. I talk about their blog all the time for email and mobile-friendly campaigns. Their audience expects this from them. They're a thought leader on the subject. They're publishing articles all the time about how to write media queries, and so they're the prime example for a brand that should have a media query in their email. And so what they've done here is you can see the desktop versions on the left, the phone versions on the right, or what it looks like on my iPhone. That top bar where you could view the web version, tweet, or that kind of thing has actually been removed. I didn't scroll past it on my phone. It just doesn't show up on this device. These things are really minor, but you can see that the newsletter section has been removed, that the padding gets a little bit smaller around the content, that some of it disappears entirely, that the font size gets a little bit larger. So they do very minor things to really enhance that experience through the use of the media query. Oh, yep. So I mentioned earlier that if you're a Photoshop user, that using a trackpad to do really precise movements is really frustrating. So the opposite is true for folks using a mobile phone and trying to view email, and that's why the finger is the new mouse. Optimizing design for a text link that you're going to click with your mouse just doesn't work on a phone. I'm using my finger. It's big and it's fat and it makes mistakes. So a lot of the UI design guidelines for operating systems on mobile devices out there recommend a 44 by 44 pixel minimum. That's a lot bigger than, I'm going to guess, the buttons that you're already currently using in your campaigns. So here's a couple examples of touch targets and good ways to use them, and this is where I introduce my scary flying fingers. One way is a text button. You can see in this Groupon email, what you typically think of as a button is a colored square, and it's got some text on it. So my finger can really easily press that on that mobile device. Another kind of button that you can think of is an image button. And it's not a button in the traditional sense, but it's an area of content that's defined. And you can see at the bottom of this email these little Polaroids that have got the addresses on them. They look a lot like buttons, but they're not what you traditionally think of as a button. But again, really easy for my finger to come in there and hit that really, really easily. So bigger fonts are better. If you have 600 pixels wide is a commonly accepted width or standard width for email campaigns. And if you're designing a 600 pixel wide email, you have to keep in mind that on the iPhone in particular, that's going to get scaled down to about 320 pixels wide. And so font sizes decrease about 50%. Another thing to keep in mind is that body copy smaller than 13 pixels is actually automatically resized in Android and iOS, so on the iPhone and the iPad. There's a little bit of CSS3 magic, which is down there on the bottom that you can implement to stop that from happening, but it's going to make the text probably too small to read on that small screen. I recommend body copy being no smaller than 14 pixels and headlines and other subheads to be at least 22 pixels. And here's an example of what might happen in these instances. There's this Expedia email on the navigation. If I zoom in on that, we can see here that they used like a 11 or 12 pixel font in their navigation, and guess what? It got automatically resized. So this thing is actually pretty common in email, where you see things breaking unusually. Navigation is especially suspect to this. It happens more often than you'd like to think. All right, so streamlining is another thing that you want to do on a mobile email. I call it Twitterizing your content. We're a social media conference. It's 140 characters or less, right? So short, direct copy is good. People have really short attention spans these days. They're used to reading stuff on Twitter. They want to get your point across in the email as quickly as they can. So pages and pages and pages of copy. I don't want to flick through that on my phone. I want to read it, get to the point right away. So really prioritize your content. What can I eliminate, reduce, Just completely get rid of it. Go on a house cleaning adventure. And then make your calls to action really clear and direct. And this just goes for all email in general. I'm appalled at the number of emails that I get that when I get them, I don't know what you wanted me to do. And as marketers, I don't know how you're measuring that. If the user doesn't know what to do, you're not getting any sort of clicks, so you're not getting any conversions, you're not getting any metrics back about whether or not that email actually worked. So we talk about apps a lot, I think, over the next couple days. This is an email from Runkeeper. I use their app. I like to run. They realize that if you have a mobile application, that folks might also be reading email on a mobile device. So in their email that they sent me recently to download the newest Runkeeper app update, there's a big, fat finger-friendly button on it. Runkeeper's competitor, however, sent me the following email. And there's the link to download the latest version of their app. So they have a little bit more of a, I think, mobile-friendly focus in mind when they're sending out their emails. Or like I said, they've realized that their users are mobile. And one concept that I really urge you all to consider as well is the mobile first. So a gentleman named Luke W. I always butcher his last name, so I don't pronounce it in public. But you can look him up on Twitter at Luke W. Sort of pioneered this concept for the web, and I'm advocating it for the email world as well. It's that when you're designing, that you should design for the mobile experience first. Chances are that designing for a mobile experience actually makes your desktop experience better too, so why not? There's a couple of examples here. This email from a company called 360, I think definitely had this approach in mind. That's their desktop email on the left. It's got big images, big fonts, like simple copy. It kind of hits all those marks right off the head. And then there it is on my phone. And I think it works really well in both environments. It's simple and to the point. I know what to do, and it's very useful. Here's another one. I love Fab. I think everyone that has a design bone in their body loves Fab. I love their emails. They do a really good job with the touch targets of using images. I know I can just hit that image and I'm going to go right to that spot on their site. It looks great on my phone. It looks great on a desktop. And they do a really good job of advertising their app as well. So I've got an iPhone. I'm an iPhone user. And I got an invitation to download their iPhone and their iPad app, whereas my coworker who has an Android phone got an invitation to download their Android app. There was no crossover there, so they're doing some really smart sort of mobile email app crossover stuff. If you're not a customer, but you just are interested in seeing what other folks are doing, I'd recommend signing up for their stuff, and plus they've got cool stuff too. So things to skip, or maybe what shouldn't you do? There's lots of good things that we just talked about, but there's also some things maybe you shouldn't do as well. So here at the top of this email is what's called the pre-header, right? A lot of folks do this. It's like, view this email as a web page, view it on the mobile, come visit our Twitter page, or share this on Facebook. The problem is, if I go and try to grab that with my finger, what in the world am I going to hit? So without zooming in, scrolling around, so another blogger out there calls these cluster bombs, right? You just don't know what you're going to hit. So don't create friction for the user by creating like this link farm of grossness. It's not going to help anyone. So the other thing is the mobile version. So how many people have seen this up at the top of an email where it says view this email on a mobile device? Click the button, right? Cool. So here's a Pottery Barn that's got that in there. First of all, friction, hello. Where can I even grab that link? It's like hidden somewhere in the upper top. But when I press that view on mobile link on my iPhone, that's what I get taken to. That's a mobile version. And what it is, it's just a plain text copy of the email posted to a web page somewhere that's accessible that way. I like to think of this as more of a BlackBerry version. If you have folks, if you know your audience, and you know that people are viewing email on a really old BlackBerry, this is a great example for them because their phones don't handle HTML email very well. It could be that their phone completely butchered the creative and I can't view it. So a text-only version is more pleasant. But if I keep going, if I click one of these links in this Pottery Barn email, I should go to their website, and it's beautifully optimized for my mobile device. So the moral of the story is don't waste clicks on a less than optimal text version if you've got a mobile optimized website. I'm pretty sure that most of you, if you're doing email marketing, you're getting maybe 1 or 2 clicks per email. And so do you really want to waste that click on that text version in the middle when you could be sending someone to your mobile optimized website instead? Some more things not to do. Mobile versioning. If you have the ability to see where people are opening, which you do, you can tell if someone's opening on the Android phone, you can tell if someone's opening on a BlackBerry. Resist the temptation to segment really heavily based upon that data and send specific versions for each kind of device. You can't predict where users are going to open. We have a lot of data saying that just because you might have opened on a phone once, you're not going to open every time. So rather than, say, using data that says all of your subscribers or 50% of your subscribers say open on an iPhone from time to time, rather than segmenting that out and saying, all right, I'm going to send everyone a mobile optimized, iPhone optimized email to these folks, send them an email promoting an iPhone app instead, right? Because you can't predict where people are going to open. And then furthermore, distinctions between environments, again, between mobile, between desktop, those are more important than what you're going to see happening on specific devices. So rather than focusing on devices themselves, focus on the environment. Again, touchscreens, I need bigger buttons, bigger text. Devices don't really matter so much. And then don't forget that first impressions still count. So this is going back to Email Marketing 101 with from sender names and subject lines. Here's an example on my phone coming from, again, Expedia. I don't mean to pick on them. I really actually love them, but they got a couple good examples. So if you take a look at these, you see two of the subject lines, OW and RT. I didn't really know what those stood for. I travel a lot, and still it took me a couple minutes. When I see RT, I automatically think retweet, not round trip. So again, think about that. Here's another one from, I don't even know because it's from Brian Carroll. I can't remember, right? Because who's Brian Carroll? I don't know. And then Romy, I'm a marketer. I know ROI, but I had to Google what Romy meant, right? And then lastly, here's my favorite. It's not on a mobile device, but I had to include it in here. From Old Navy, save 20% on your next adult purchase. So what's recognizable, trustworthy, relevant? Does the subscriber have a relationship with the person or the brand? So this Brian Carroll example, again, I honestly can't remember what company that came from, and I don't know who Brian is. So that brand recognition is totally lost on me. And then use language they're familiar with, no acronyms, ROMI, OW, RT. Am I round tripping or am I retweeting? I don't know. All right, so support for mobile email. I mentioned a couple minutes ago that older BlackBerries have really crap support for HTML, but I've used a lot of iPhone examples in here, not because I'm trying to sell you Apple products, but because I have one and it's the easiest way for me to take screenshots. So let's talk about a little bit about the nitty-gritty and what works where. This chart is kind of complex. Again, don't try to write all this down. It's up on SlideShare. It's up on our website. But generally speaking, the landscape is better than desktop email. All of these phones display HTML email sometimes better than the desktop environment does. If you produce or design a lot of emails, you'll know that Outlook 2007, Outlook 2010, and Gmail are particularly evil when it comes to proper rendering and display of HTML. All these devices display HTML. A vast number of them, while they don't display images by default, there's a prompt to turn them on. So that's good news as well, and images are eventually enabled. Some of them support preview text. That's a little bit of snippet text that you'll sometimes see, like coming after the subject line. A couple of them support that. Only the iPhone, iOS, so iPad and iPhone will scale the email down to the width of the screen. All the other phones, you're going to get just sort of the upper left-hand corner of the email, and the user's left to scroll up and down and left and right. So it's another good thing to keep in mind. When you're really considering whether or not to make your email skinnier maybe than your normal width, is that if you have a lot of other users that aren't using iOS, that they're going to have to scroll left and right as well as up and down to view your entire creative. And then all of these, again, are going to enlarge your fonts to some degree. Some of them, it's really predictable. So iOS and Android, anything less than 13 pixels. These other operating systems seem to really, it seems really arbitrary, to be frank with you. I haven't figured out their secret formula for how they like to modify fonts, but a lot of them do. So here's some examples. Right here on the left, we've got an Android phone. It does display alt text, which is really, really great. So when images are turned off, I still get that alt message behind it. I also get a nice big image to display the pictures. Same thing with the Symbian here. Nice big buttons to let me see that I want to turn images on. And there's, again, with Symbian with images off too. They do not handle alt text. So I guess the moral of that story is to plan for an images off environment. Back to, email marketing a couple years ago, the fact that images were blocked in a lot of places, I think, made a big splash, and a lot of folks didn't know what to do about that. It got better for a little while, and now it's kind of going backwards again because a lot of these mobile devices are turning images off by default. So Windows Mobile 7, if any of you haven't played with the Windows Mobile 7 phone, it's a vast improvement from 6.5. It's almost, I would say it's on par with iOS. I actually kind of liked it a bit when I first played with my first Windows 7 phone. If I wasn't such an Apple devotee, I might have considered switching. But so here we've got some Winmo previews. Here on the left, again, that preview or that sort of snippet text, you can probably just barely see that. So we've got gap.com, the subject line is Cyber Monday comes early, and then the snippet text, online only, ends Monday. That's the first few lines of the email that are getting pulled out into that snippet text. It's almost like a second subject line or an extension upon that you can use pretty wisely there. So Windows Mobile does block images, it does not display alt text, but in its place displays these multiple prompts to download images instead. So probably don't need to highlight that, but that's kind of nice actually. There's a lot of opportunities there for the user to download images when they choose. And then there on the right, we've got Window with images on. And there's a good example, again, of how I might need to scroll horizontally left and right to see the whole email on a Windows Mobile phone. This crate and barrel example is good for a couple reasons. The first, they've got a big touch-friendly button on there. It's really easy for me to grab that with my finger. They've also included the call to action on the left-hand side of the email. So if you think about devices that aren't going to scale your email, that I'm going to have to scroll left and right, I'm going to have to scroll to the right of the email if I want to see anything over there. So if you have a really important call to action, put that on the left-hand side for those users that might be using other kinds of phones. All right, and BlackBerry, yay! So BlackBerry 6 has much better support for HTML than previous versions of BlackBerry did. You can see here on the left, I do have to hit the little BlackBerry button and then go up and hit Get Images in order to enable images. There's a third screen that I omitted, but there's one in between going from there to there that says, are you sure you want to download images? So BlackBerry really makes sure that you really want to download images. I have to hit yes or no, and then I do get, again, a nicely supported email, but again, that necessary to scroll left and right. All right, so that's about all I've got. Here's some great resources. Of course, the Litmus blog. Style Campaign is one of my favorites. Anna Yeaman is the lovely gal that writes that. She's got media query examples, great mobile design tips. Campaign Monitor is another one of my favorites. They're an ESP. You can send your email through them, but they also just have a great blog, lots of great resources on there. We've published a couple infographics. We've got a anatomy of a mobile email one, and then one on email market share stats that are available on our blog too. Good stuff out there. And then there's all my stuff again. So I've got time for questions, I think.
Round of applause for Justine. Thank you. Please raise your hand high if you have any questions for Justine. Go one over there. We're going to do 2 questions, so if you have another one, raise your hand now so we can get to you.
You spent a lot of time talking about HTML designed emails. What about the text email? Especially in the B2B world, I see much higher open rates when you send a text email versus an HTML email.
I was going to say, if you're tracking open rates, then it's not really a text email. It's really an HTML email. The same things apply. I mean, I get a lot. So I'm B2B, right? I'm a marketer too, and I send emails all the time. But I've found that folks that they'll test a text link versus a button link in their email, and buttons often do better. So I can send you some specific B2B examples. There's not a whole lot of really great ones out there. But the ones that I see from a creative standpoint that I really appreciate, again, are the ones that make it really clear to me. If your email is mostly text, even though you're still tracking links and you're still tracking open rates, and I'm a user, I still really don't know what you want me to do unless I'm reading all of that text, right, and just looking out for the links. If I have hierarchy, again, through text, if I have bigger headline, smaller, subhead, that's a great way that you can create hierarchy and tell the user what they want you to do. Little images here and there, color, those are all things that will help your emails, I think, both display and perform better too.
thank you very much for your time, and your presentation was quite excellent. Could you spend just a few brief moments, because like a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, have rampantly gone onto the whole like sending out email newsletters as a way to communicate just what's new, what's happening, and they're using Constant Contact, MailChimp, everything like that.
Yep.
And it's like, yay, we got the camel to finally drink the water, but at the same time, it's like, but you're sending out, Dr. Zhivago on your mobile phone. So could you maybe talk a few minutes about how to address like the informative email?
What's the goal of those newsletters? If the goal of the newsletter is to get the person to click through to read more content on a website, if the goal is to get them to sign up for a webinar, if the goal is to get them to watch a recording online, again, like you don't need to put paragraphs and paragraphs of content. Even though it's a newsletter, that doesn't automatically mean that the email has to be 10 pages when I print it off, right? Again, like I've got great examples of newsletters that are like a page. I don't even need to scroll on a desktop, right? So again, what's the ultimate, like, what do I really need to boil this content down to get my point across, to tell the user what to do? How do I best tell them how to go there? So is it click here to read more information, or is it more of less of a passive call to action and more of an active call to action? So just click here to read more versus like get the 10 rules of whatever, right? Same thing with signing up for things. Tell me dates, times, like get down to the nitty gritty, like 3 bullet points. I actually thought Jason's agenda for this conference was great. Rather than writing out this long like paragraph of what I was going to talk about, he's like, I want 2 sentences and 3 bullet points. And I was like, perfect, right? And then when it comes to brick and mortar too, it's again, what do you want the person to do? If it's an in-store sale, give me a link to view locations. Show me a map, like what's going to make my life easier. And then tying that's an even better opportunity for mobile, because if you're pushing to brick and mortar, make sure you've got there's special ways that you can format links to make sure that they launch the right applications on mobile devices. So make sure that if I want to call someone, I can call to get directions, I can find you on a map, like that kind of thing. Cool.
Excellent. One more round of applause for Justine. Thank you.
Thanks.